I grew up on Buchanan Street, what we like to call back by the St. Bernard Project. I lived there all of my life. I'm currently the clerk of Civil District Court here in New Orleans. I have very, very fond memories of growing up back in the St. Bernard. The thing that I remember the most is we were like a family. On my block on Buchanan Street, it was my entire family. My grandparents lived in one house. The house next to them was my grandmother's sister. And then there was the Johnson family. They were the only family that wasn't related to us, but they were like family. And then it was our house, my mom's sister, one of my Aunt Lilly, and then the last house on the block was another sister, my Aunt Clara.
To me, we were very family orientated in the project. Everybody knew each other, everybody helped each other, everybody shared each other's happiness and their griefs.
June 10th, 2001, to be exact, year 2001. My father was over visiting. He helped me with the girls a lot. He helped me raise the girls a lot. He was next to their father figure. And we both went to bed. And we were having problems with this 220 box in the living room that's there for the air conditioning. I had problems with it before. And I reported it to maintenance. Everything was supposed to be taken care of. On the night of June 9th, we all went to sleep. And we was resting in the bed. And it was an upstairs, downstairs apartment in Fayette Park. Fayette Park is one of the first developments built. And they're very, 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 very old. So we were sleeping and my father noticed smoke and a fire downstairs in the development. Both of the bedrooms was upstairs. When my father and I went downstairs to put it out, the fire was more into the walls, into a line, just surrounded by lines in the walls. It was more, my father mentioned at that time, it was electrical. So we realized we couldn't put it up. We went back upstairs, and what we used to do in the development was take window units, air conditioning, and board them all down in our windows in the development to make sure we cool and secure. Okay, however, my windows was boarded down. My father and I struggled to get out the apartment, but we did. We made it down the fire escape to the hallway where he passed. He took his last breath in the hallway at 1413 Fayette Parkway.
People always have preconceived notions about the projects. You know, don't get me wrong, they had its bads, but I think the most important thing to it is the community fabric that was in the project, you know, where you know when somebody was cooking, you can go by their house and get something to eat.
Giving birth to my children, especially the twins, that was challenging because now I'm coming home with 2 babies and it's like, you know, the neighbors stepped in and, you know, they were willing to help if I needed any help and, you know, they bought gifts and it just was so happy to know that I wasn't in it alone, you know.
My neighbors, they were older, upstairs and downstairs. They would keep my kids somewhere one day at a time while I go to work and come back. They didn't charge me anything. They just said it was just a helping hand. So I paid my gratitude to them and stuff like that because when they got down, I had to wind up look after them and help them out.
It was more like a family because I know when I first started working, I didn't have no babysitter, but the ladies lived in the next building, Miss Urme and Miss Taylor. They used to watch Danetta. And those people, we give them $5 or $6. They used to comb their hair, clean them up, everything, you know. And it wasn't no nursing. You don't have to worry about your children. They was gonna see that they was taken care of. Because I know my daughter used to say, "Oh, I get tired of going by me. All they have is grits." But whatever her children had, she had.
Great memories of St. Bernard housing development. Our address was 3643 St. Bernard Apartment E, 3rd floor. And next door was the Tickles family, and We had the Haynes family and the Asmores. There was a sense of community at that time. Lawns were kept clean. Folk hung their clothes outside. It wasn't until years later that folks started stealing the clothes, but we had a good sense of community during that time. Very fond memories of my childhood with other families, of course, the Asmore families. And they, as my mother would work, she worked the night shift at Charity from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, and they would, of course, feed me during the day and take care of me after school. But a great sense of community.
It would be just about all of our church members from Gentilly Greater Harvest dropping their kids off by the Doty family, who allowed their teenage daughters to basically babysit the neighborhood. And I remember playing out in the courts and just having, you know, a bunch of fun, making tents with sheets over the metal clothing lines that were out in front of every apartment, you know, just doing childlike things. And we would almost get lost in a day of just having fun with other children out in the streets and in the courts, such that the day would go by so fast, and, you know, and then Mom would be home to pick us up. But that was how we were able to survive, you know, in a time where you didn't have very many opportunities for youth in community. Parents couldn't afford child care, and how we were able to overcome the whole latchkey child phenomenon. Basically, it was neighbors watching each other's children.
Great time in my life. You know, made a lot of friends. It was an environment back then when we were taught to respect our elders, respect each other, and respect the place we lived. It was our environment. Is where we learned to swim, ride our bicycles, skate, play football, baseball. We all went to Willie Hall Playground back there, and because there were so many kids growing up around your same age group, you had just a huge plethora of friends. I mean, so there's never a lack of coming outside and somebody wasn't out there to play with you. You know, today I tease my child when he and I are sitting around talking about the old days. I said, we didn't even have air conditioning back there. We had those big window fans, the big reed fans in our windows. But you know what? Those fans kept our house pretty cool.
Growing up in the project, it was all, I tell a person, it was unique. I talk to my son right now today because the experiences that we had growing up, he'll never have. You had different courtyards. And in your courtyard that you grew up in, if there wasn't playing the games you wanted to play, you can go to another courtyard. You had certain courtyards that wanted to play baseball. Certain courtyards wanted to play tops or marbles. Certain courtyards wanted to play cool can.
It was just a ball and sticks and some old soda cans or beer cans that we found, and the objective of the game was to take two sticks and try to prevent the opposing team from knocking the cans down. You would have to smack the ball as they threw toward the can, and once you hit the ball, you were running, you would score going from each side of where the cans were located.
One unique thing about growing up back there was, as you had different courtyards, again, you had the different activities. Unfortunately, the courtyard that I spent majority of my time growing up in was Duplessis and Ford. And anyone could tell you, coming up, one of the roughest courts to come in was Duplessis and Ford. Because as the Gibson court played a lot of football and the Milton court played a lot of baseball, Duplessis and Ford was a rough court because that's where you had a lot of dice shooting taking place, gambling, etc. But with that, I mean, childhood was phenomenal. Even those that did wrong as a kid respected the kids when we were kids. When you would be out there and you had guys out there, they would clear out when the kids were coming home from school. They would clear out when the kids were out there playing.
We had good times, and we never thought of it as being bad. You know, like people say the project, because they had drugs and all that too, but it was all back there on Ford Park, you know, if they had any. And the guys at that time, you couldn't go back there. They'll tell you, get away from back here. Or, you know, it wasn't like the kids with the drugs now and all that.
One thing about growing up back in the St. Bernard is, if you didn't like the girls on your end of the project, you can go to another end. You had 4 different ends of the St. Bernard project, and each end was almost like a world of its own with a whole different group of girls.
My mother had gave me a book of food stamps. It was in the morning before I was going to school to, you know, get some donuts from the store, Burnell's. So as I went in the store, you know, I got the donuts, you know, some milk, and I saw this girl that I like, and she came in the store, and I was hesitant because I was scared that I had food stamps, and she didn't have no food stamps. So I kind of walked back to the back of the store, acting like I was looking for other little various items and stuff like that. And then she wound up coming to the front of the store. She was in front of me in the line. Then she pulled out food stamps, and that kind of gave me my assurance, like, all right, I'm good. She's spending food stamps too.
I definitely can look back and laugh and smile, you know. It was times we went to the movies, everyone knew how to catch the bus to the Joy, and we go to the Joy and have us a nice little time and catch that St. Bernard right back home.
We had some good times. Races and everything, and I always played, we played football, we played baseball, coon cane. I think his name was LaFroy, we used to call him Roe, he lived over there. He had baseball teams, and he would take us to different places and play. They don't even do that now.
My grandfather used to grow greens. It was like he had a garden in the back of the house. We had a banana tree. He grew his own greens. He made ice cream for us. You know, all this processed stuff that we do today, it wasn't like that.
My cousin, they used to stay in the East, and we thought they was rich because they stayed in the East and we stayed in the project. They used to have the Nintendos and stuff like that. So my cousin wound up coming to the project. He came, slept by our house, and we was playing spinning top. And he chipped the guy top, and he hit the guy top, and it went under the drain. And so they kind of had a fight because of the spinning top, which was real big.
I mean, we would play football, the concrete, the sidewalk would be out of bounds. So just imagine getting tackled on that concrete. If you wasn't quick enough to get out there, you definitely got tackled there. We would come out, we would play tops. You would sharpen the points on your tops to make sure that you had the best points. You're trying to split their tops. We played marbles. You would come out with your cat eyes as your shooters, and you know, everything took place. We call it the yum yum tree. You know, we had, never forget, we had Miss Lamam is what we would call her. She collected cans, but she was smart. She didn't collect cans. We would go out and collect cans, and she would give you cookies for the cans you would collect, because she was the sweet shop. She sold the frozen cups, the cookies, the candies, and we would literally go out and find cans and bring her the cans, and we would get 2 cookies for a can.
There was a family right around the corner from where we lived that sold Hucklebucks, frozen cups. People were very industrious, you know, and so it was the Sterlings, and they lived on St. Denis. The Fairview was on St. Denis and Buchanan, and the Sterlings lived on St. Denis, and that's what she did. And everybody would, you know, go there and buy Hucklebucks, muffins. It was like a little grocery store that was run out of our house.
People would ask, what was a Hucklebuck? Well, whether you call it a Hucklebuck or a frozen cup or whatever it was basically sweetened colored water, frozen, that became a cool treat in the summertime. And you had folks that actually sold Hucklebucks out their houses, or you can go to the sweet shop and you bought a Hucklebuck. And you can get a red one, a yellow one, a green one, man, or whatever color you wanted. It's basically Kool-Aid, I guess that's what it really was. Just frozen Kool-Aid that you got. But it was just like, it was the thing that cooled you down in the middle of that stifling summer heat here in New Orleans. And as a child, I mean, imagine, you know, hundreds of kids running around with Hucklebucks, and they got red mouths and green mouths and orange mouths and purple mouths, because that stuff would just sting your lips and sting your teeth and sting your tongue. But it had to be one of the best, cheap, simple treats that you could have as a child. I don't see those things anymore. I really don't see them. And it's an unfortunate thing, because I think it was part of the classic history of New Orleans. And I bet if you ask any of us over a certain age about a Hucklebuck, and that big smile will flash there and say, man, I remember them Hucklebuck. And we always had our favorite place to get our favorite Hucklebuck, because everybody made Hucklebuck just a tad bit different. So you knew who made the best Hucklebucks in your area. So you went by Miss Morrison's house, or you went by Mr. Brown's house, and you say, look, I'm going to buy me a Hucklebuck. And look, man, that was just the way it was back then. And you know, even today, when I tease my kids about Hucklebucks, like, Dad, you were just poor. That's all it boils down. You were really just poor. You guys didn't have soft drinks? Like, well, not all the time, but we always had Hucklebucks.
Yeah, we didn't do frozen cups. We didn't let them do them. They served them, but you know, that was unreported income. So you know they wasn't gonna tell me. Right? The sweet shops was unreported income. So I'm not supposed to know about that.
You know, not too far from Alden's was the Dairy Queen. And they used to sell French fry sandwiches. Can you believe that? We used to buy French fries on French bread, and that was a sandwich.
They sold a unique sandwich back then. It was a po' boy potato sandwich. It was basically French fries placed on a po' boy. And, you know, it was it was a cheap sandwich. Think about it. You had starch on starch, and then you threw some mayo on it, or some ketchup, or whatever you like. But it had to be one of the best tasting sandwiches you could ever eat as a kid. An embarrassing thing was when you only had enough money to buy a potato sandwich, and people said, "Man, what are you going to get?" You said, "Man, I got me an oyster loaf." And you know good and well you had that big old potato sandwich in your bag with all that grease hanging out that bag.
I guess the thing that I remember the most is that everybody got along and watched out for each other. And if you did something wrong as a child, before you got home, it had already made it.
In that time, it took a village to raise a child, so I couldn't go too far without anyone reporting back to my mother what I had done or where I was. Again, it was a time when my mother sent me to the store. We didn't, you know, no pages or anything. They'd come out on the porch and holler your name. And you knew exactly what voice that was, and you knew what time to get in. Get in before street lights were dark.
I was protective of my boys. I had boys first. I have 3 sons and I have twin girls. My first 2, I was very protective of. They'll go to the gym, and that was as far as they could go. And when it gets dark, they have to be inside. I'm going looking for them.
One time, my grandmother, she was like a real stern lady in the project. You know, everybody kind of knew her and stuff like that. So I remember we was cutting up, we was outside or whatever. So my grandmother, she called us and she baited us in, you know, because we was doing file. Somebody must have got on the phone and called her. So she called us. She was like, "Y'all come inside." You know, she used to always, she'd say, "Mama not gonna do y'all nothing." So we wound up coming inside, and she whipped my cousins who was older than us, and she ain't whip us.
You didn't mess up in front of somebody's parents because they had the authority to get you in line. And back then, you know, we believe in, as they say, you got your behind whipped. And if you screwed up in one part of the area and somebody's mother or father recognized that you were screwing up, you can best believe by the time you got home, your parents knew you screwed up and you were going to get a second butt whipping.
They used to have this little strip right off of St. Bernard on Alfred Street where the Bynum's pharmacy. That was one brother who owned the pharmacy, and then another brother who owned the grocery store. And I was either in 3rd or 5th grade when I ran my bike into their window and crashed the entire thing, and I wasn't caught. Before I made it home, my grandparents already knew what I had done. And so if you did anything wrong, you would get what we used to call back then a whipping by the adult who saw you do it, and then you get home and you get another one. And it wasn't like you could tell your story, because in those days, you know, the adult was always right.
I was born and raised in the St. Bernard development. And I also raised my twin daughters in the St. Bernard development. I love the St. Bernard. I love the development, I love the neighborhood, I love the culture.
You know, people had birthday parties for their children. And when they had the waistline parties, we used to be crazy about them. Everybody go, you know, you go to the waistline party, measurement, sometimes 23, 24, you know, it's things like that.
Waistline parties, quarter parties. It was just a major event every evening.
We enjoyed a lot of the times when they had second lines and birthday parties. Those were some memorable times. My son had his first birthday party right downstairs on the 1st floor. And, you know, all of the neighbors, we got together and we had a folding table up and we had food and played music and sung happy birthday.
Well, the anniversary was the 10th anniversary, and it was starting off 10 good, beautiful years where My oldest girl, she had just graduated from college. My youngest girl, she graduated from elementary. And my son, he was on his way to college. It was beautiful. We all had a little to drink, food, fun, games, and whatever. And we invited whomever, had a DJ on the porch, cousins, sister, brother, nephew, uncles, nieces, in-laws, whomever, neighbors, you all was invited.
And you just had good times. And I still say, like, the reunion we had, I'm not gonna never forget that. We're trying to start it again now because we had everybody. We had Doc Willard in them. We had all of, Oliver, the people that you would say, them people ain't going back there. But they did. They went, and it was wonderful. And, we had the band. We always have the band. They got to have a second life. You know that. We had our old people on them walkers and stuff, trying to dance or whatever, and saying, Lily, you want to see me dance? 80-some years old, I be saying, no, I don't want to see you dance. You might fall down. But they did it.
Well, back in 2002, we all gathered up to join the rest of them for a Gibson Court splash. It was a shower splash. And we had police officers to block off certain streets. Gibson Street and Milton Street was blocked off in order for us to have the splash. We had our DJ, pools for the children, and food, fun and games. That's what it's all about.
Every other week they'll have something going on for everybody. People just get out there, pitch in and have fun. On Easter Sunday, they had a lot of Easter egg hunts and things for the kids. You can get out there and hide things for them to go and find and stuff like that. You go to church first, then you come back. After you come back, then y'all can get your little game started. We started putting all the stuff out there to have a little Easter egg hunt for them. Right around the buildings like we crazy, letting them find their little eggs and stuff. So it was all good.
If my neighbors or the neighbor across the street had a birthday, we would buy a big birthday cake. We would sit down with the children and the mothers, single or if they had husbands, and we would wish each other happy birthday. The children grew up. We would all get in cars and go to the schools and participate in anything, any activities that the children were involved in from the church. Our children were Reverend Darby. Our children were the Thumbelina brides and grooms, and we all participated in everything in the community that involved us.
Because the residents had rallied around each other in the development and in our St. Bernard community, we were able to transition that into the school system. And as a result, while we were making waves in the community, in the St. Bernard community, in our little 5-block area, from Sears Street to Sidney Street, from St. Bernard to Hamburg, and the Gibson Streets in between, we were able to condescend and bring that same type of love into the school system. And Phillips Elementary and Phillips Junior High became some of the better schools during that time in terms of our residents. And when they would look at it, and Ms. Maurice Waters was the principal, they would say, well, how did these children out of St. Bernard learn this stuff? How did these children learn the culture? Because we had community leaders who were interested.
I also remember, when we left that community when I was in college, just kind of longing to go back to that place that we had moved from. And I started a program during my college years at Xavier University called the Home for Homework. Contrary to popular belief that, most parents who lived in public housing were just at home and should be able to tend to their kids, actually, most of them did have jobs and worked and, jobs where they were doing domestic work, and sometimes just didn't get home till, after 5 o'clock in the evening. But their children would sit on the porch or just run around and play in the courts with unsupervised, adults, without adult supervision, basically. So the Home for Homework program was intended to give young people who were latchkey children living in the St. Bernard Housing Project a safe place to go, with young people who were college bound, in college, coming into the community to inspire and support and mentor young children in after school hours and give them a safe haven.
Most importantly, all the parents worked. Every day these adults would get up and go to work and do their duties to supply for their families just like everybody else. And they were hardworking people. Most of them rode the bus. And it's just so ironic that I am over the local bus authority today.
And the Lord called me to preach, and would you know it, He sends me right back home. I was baptized at the Asia Baptist Church under Dr. Bridges when I was 9 years old, still in this community. Married at the church, and here I am back in the community, trying to, again, make things better.
But growing up back there, I met some friends of a lifetime. It's a unique group of us that grew up in the St. Bernard Project. We had 6 friends growing up, and we were friends since 8 years old. Out the 6 of us, we got into it all. We ran a tough and tight crew. Some of us went to Phillips, some of us went to Nelson, but we all came together in the project and played and home. We all played football at Willie Hall Playground. As we got older, we went to different schools. Out the 6 of us that came up back here, 4 of us made it. Unfortunately, back in '97, Keith was murdered. I made it to make it to my pivotal point in my career of being a NOAA director. Jabal, he was the head football coach at Carr, still is. Ernest is a social worker for Tulane Hospital. Fount lives in Dallas now. He's the auditor for IRS. And Greg is just chilling. He's working, but he's still just chilling. And, with saying that, out the different crews that grew up in the project, our crew, 4 out of 6 made it. Unfortunately, we have guys that grew up with us like Derek Ellsworth that was murdered at 17, 18. Darren Brown, who was killed. Byron Hall and Byron Mason, who were killed. There's so many guys that grew up back here with us that were murdered or that's incarcerated for life or for a very long time, close to life. But with that, when you reflect back on growing up in the project, you think about the good times. You think about the days in the summers where we played egg fights. Well, you would take all the eggs out your mom's refrigerator, and this end against that end, we had egg fights. We had water balloon fights. It got to the point where it became tomato and potato fights. And I mean, we did it. We had dance-offs. We had contests, rap-offs. It's just, it's growing up back here was an experience that I would never change.
I could, remember just as a child, just growing up in the St. Bernard Housing Project, at that time I really had no fear of safety and, had free range of the development. And, I could remember, my brothers and sisters, us, just kind of being able to walk around freely at any time of day and even after dark, without ever, wondering, if we were safe or felt any threat towards our lives. So I guess, in a real sense of, thinking about, the then and now and some of the stereotypes that living in public housing may conjure up for some, that, contrary to that, we felt safe, we felt, at home, and we felt like we were among community, and community that knew us, we knew them, and they all looked out for the children.
As I speak and I reminisce about some of the people that I was raised with back there, you see these people on the street today, or you see them in other parts of your professional experiences, and you just wonder how amazing that population was during that time, because some of the the city leaders and the city founders and some of the technical experts within our city today actually had a similar background that I came from.
And one of the things that we learned being a resident management group is that the residents can do anything they set their minds to do with the proper training, proper commitment, proper people in place. St. Bernard was able to then raise our consciousness where everybody was responsible for their children. We were responsible for our living accommodations. We were responsible for keeping the area clean. And several years throughout my tenure as the resident manager, our development, because of the uniqueness of it and the beautification projects that we had going on, we were selected to be on the cover of Henno annual program every year. We had one particular resident who's now deceased. She, Miss Dorothy Wilson, had the prettiest yard in the city. And when you would come down at Christmas time, down St. Bernard Avenue, the entire buildings would just be lit up so that when the people pass, they can see that we are not pigs, we are human beings. And we have the same wants and desires that everybody else have, to raise our children, to send them to school, to make good citizens of them, to keep our area clean, to beautify the area.
You know, back then we didn't have the issues that these kids have to deal with today. We didn't have the crime issues to deal with. We didn't have the drug issues to deal with. You know, occasionally you had a guy maybe got in a fight and maybe, just maybe, you heard somebody maybe pulled out a knife, and that was like big business, man. Somebody pulled out a knife on somebody, but guns and gunshots every day was unheard of during that period of time.
Folk maintained their lawns. You know, they grew gardens at this time. Again, they hung things out on the lawn. A total different community than we saw prior to Katrina and going up to that. It's just a totally different community. Same buildings, but different with the people.
But then when we decided we were going to tear down some of the other sites, we began to mix our communities. And because we mixed communities from uptown and downtown, and we found out throughout the years that the residents throughout the city is territorial, and St. Bernard was no different. And we didn't want other people coming in, infiltrating our community, because their way of life was just a little bit different from ours, and we had a little chaos, and we had to do other things to bring the community together.
The street that I lived on, it wasn't very much of chaos, but my children two of them was always away in college. My baby girl was the only one really home, and only chaos that went on when she was out there in the courtyard playing with her little friends, and when one of her little classmates got one of the bullets from when they was trying to shoot after one other older guy. And it just frightened me where I just wanted to just pack up and leave. But I still hung in there. But right today, she's, a little stuck behind it.
One of the most horrific experiences I remember in the St. Bernard Housing Project was losing an uncle who was fatally gunned down and left in his own blood in the stairway. I remember, as a child getting the news that my uncle had just been shot and murdered, and actually going down to the scene with my parents, with my mother and my grandmother, and kind of witnessing the first murder scene as a child. And unfortunately, it was an uncle. And after that, there was, just a real threat of security for our family, which actually caused us to flee the development because we fear retaliation.
I remember my little brother when he was like 4 years old, he fell off the third floor. Off the third floor, he was by a friend of mine, my mother, across the court with, and he fell off the third floor. I think he hit like the second floor, then the stairs, right? And I remember hearing that because he was staying with my mother and her friend in the project, and I was kind of, going here and there to various different places. So, I think that was kind of, interesting. That was kind of one of the most important, not really the most important, but an important story in my life, just knowing the possibility that my little brother had fell off the 3rd floor and nobody wasn't watching him.
I knew that I was poor and learned to be tough in the streets. Occasionally I got into fights because kids made fun of my previous school year clothes and no Nikes. But the project used to be so alive, like a drummer beating his drum.